There is something you have made that almost no one has seen yet. A piece of work that is essentially finished. The document is written or close to it. The product mostly works. The idea is clear enough that you could explain it to a stranger in maybe 2 minutes, and yes, it's there, unsent, unpublished, one more pass away from being ready, and it has been one more pass away from ready for a long time now. I have a folder like that, and the strange thing is we almost never call it what it is. We call it standards. We call it not being ready. We call it wanting to do it right. Here's the claim I want to make, and I want to make it early so you can argue with me the whole way through. A lot of what we call perfectionism is not really about quality at all. It is fear, wearing the most respectable costume it can find. And the reason it stays hidden is that the costume is genuinely convincing to other people and much more importantly to ourselves. Because success was never just about having potential. Almost everyone who's stuck has plenty of potential. Success is about whether that potential is allowed to move or whether it stays frozen on the shelf because every way of moving feels somehow too dangerous to risk. I think this matters more now than it used to, and not because people got weaker. It matters because hesitation has become extremely easy to justify. We live in a moment that hands you an endless supply of good reasons to wait. More research to do, a better tool to learn first, a cleaner plan to draw up. And we carry a feed in our pocket that shows us everyone else's finished, polished, applauded work and none of their unsent folders. So our own unfinished things look uniquely far from ready. The standards in every field are visible and high, so holding yourself to them looks like seriousness rather than fear. Perfectionism is the one anxiety that everyone around you will congratulate you for having. And before I go further, let me concede the honest part, because if I skip it, I lose you, and I should. Sometimes the extra pass really is the right call. A better plan and one more revision before the thing is good enough to really stand behind. Craft is real, so rushing it is a real mistake. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that every doubt is a cowardice. That would be its own kind of lie. But here's the distinction that the whole video turns on. Sometimes the extra pass is about the work, and sometimes the extra pass is about you, about protecting you from what happens after you let the work go. Those two feel identical from the inside. They produce the exact same behavior, the same careful, reasonable delay. And learning to tell them apart is most of the skill. So let us go underneath the feeling, because there is a real mechanism here, and it is not a character flaw. When you imagine putting the thing out, publishing it, sending it out, saying it out loud, your body does something quietly dramatic. It treats the social risk as if it were a physical one. There's research on this that I find genuinely clarifying. Naomi Eisenberger and Matthew Lieberman put people in a brain scanner and had them get excluded from a simple online game. And the regions that lit up overlapped with the regions that process physical pain. Now I want to be careful, because overclaiming here would be exactly the kind of thing that this video is against. That study is correlational neuroimaging. It has been argued about, and the same brain area is not the same as the same thing, but the felt experience it points at is one you probably already know from the inside. Social rejection rarely lands as mere information. It feels closer to an injury. Your nervous system, which was shaped in a world where being cast out of the group could actually kill you, has never fully learned that a critical comment is not a predator. So when you go to the thing, the machinery that should be weighing a small professional risk instead fires off like your survival is on the line. This is where my book gives me a tool I reach for constantly, and it is the heart of this whole video. So let me put it plainly now, rather than make you wait for it. I sort the expectations in my life into three kinds: musts, shoulds, and cans. A must is something with real consequences if you violate it. Legal, financial, professional, relational. Break a contract, betray someone's trust, miss the thing that actually pays the rent. Real stakes, real damage. A should is softer but still real. If you violate it, you might get criticized, feel guilty, lose a little status, sit in some discomfort for a while. Uncomfortable but survivable and usually temporary. And a can is the zone of maximum freedom and experiment. If you do it, something good might happen. If you do not, almost nothing bad happens at all. Most of the work you are sitting on, the post, the project, the conversation, the small public thing, most of it lives in can. And here's the bug: the actual malfunction, because naming it is what lets you catch it. The problem is not the three categories. The problem is that under fear, they drift upwards. A can quietly gets reclassified as a should, and suddenly an experiment that could only help you feels like an obligation you are failing. Then the should drifts up into a must, and ordinary social discomfort, the possibility that someone might disagree with you, starts to feel like a genuine threat to your safety. And once your mind has filed it under must, your body responds accordingly. The same nervous system that should be reserved for real danger gets switched on for the act of publishing a paragraph. You're not being weak, you're running survival software on a situation that does not warrant it, because somewhere in the sorting a can got stamped as a must. And it is worth being precise about why the drift always runs upward and not down, because that is the part that makes it fixable. Your threat system is built to answer one question fast: approach or avoid. It is very old and very quick, and it cannot read duration or reversibility. It does not compute, well, this will sting for a week, against, well, this will mark me for years. Under enough arousal, it collapses both into a single signal: avoid, and hands it to you as fear. So fear does not really make you overestimate the odds of something going wrong. It does something quieter and worse. It strips out the one dimension that tells a should from a must, which is how long the damage actually lasts. And once that dimension is gone, everything uncomfortable gets the same red tag. Just let me ground this, because it stays abstract otherwise. Think about the difference between a natural law and a man-made rule. If you press the gas pedal, the car moves as long as there is fuel in the tank. That is a natural law. It does not care what you believe. It does not negotiate. It's the same on a Tuesday as on a Sunday. Run out of fuel and the car stops every time. Human consequences are not like that. They are man-made rules, social and negotiated, and far less predictable. And the error we make, the one underneath so much stuckness, is that we treat the man-made rules as if they were natural laws. We treat group disapproval as if it were proof that we are wrong. We treat a piece of criticism as if it were a verdict from reality itself. We treat the possibility of backlash as if it were certain destruction. But disapproval is not gravity. Someone disliking your work is not the universe returning a result. It is one person with their own story having a reaction. Now, sometimes disapproval is real information. A market that stays silent, a mentor who winces, the same critique arriving from several people who know the work. That can be reality talking, and the move here is to listen. The error is not taking disapproval seriously. The error is treating every flicker of it as if it were a verdict from the universe itself, the way gravity is a verdict, when most of it is actually one person reacting from inside their own story. We confuse the two constantly, and the confusion is very expansive. Here is my own version, and it is not flattering, which is the only reason it is actually worth telling. When I was trying to launch my book and the app around it, I told myself I needed more structure, more clarity, a better sequence before any of it went out. It sounded like strategy. What was actually happening is that I had already put real money and the better part of a year into the thing, and the consequence I could not face was not a critic. It was standing in public as the person who spent all of that and then watched it land flat. Who overestimated himself out loud where people who know me could see. So I kept the work in the folder because in the folder it was still potential. It could still potentially become something. It could not fail yet. I had filed a handful of small, completely recoverable actions under must. Not one of them was a must. I was not protecting my income or my family. I was protecting my self-image from a bruise and calling it diligence. And this is the deeper cost, the one that makes it more than a productivity problem. The thing you are not shipping is not just sitting there neutrally. In the book, I think about it in terms of energy. Potential energy is stored possibility, a ball resting at the top of a hill full of everything it could do and doing none of it. Kinetic energy is movement while it is happening. It is the ball actually rolling. It is the post going out, the conversation happening, the work meeting the world. And being stuck is very rarely a shortage of potential. You have potential. The finished thing in the folder is pure potential. Being stuck is the failure to convert it, because every available way of converting it has been tagged as too dangerous. At some point, I had to admit to myself that what I was calling strategy was not strategy at all. It was potential energy refusing to become kinetic. And the refusal had a shape I recognized. One part of me wanted to build. One part wanted to say the thing clearly. One part wanted to avoid every possible conflict. The energy was all there. The direction was just not coordinated. So none of it moved. And I want to be accurate about how it ended because I wrote about it in my book, Master Your Life Script, and the record matters. What got the ball rolling was not courage, and it was not more structure. It was making the test smaller. I put a rough version in front of a handful of real people early on purpose, while feedback was still cheap. A prototype instead of a whole launch. The fear had predicted I couldn't survive being seen mid-draft, and the prediction failed quietly several times in a row. And every time it failed, another must label peeled off. I didn't feel ready and then act. I acted small and the readiness followed. Now let me turn the honesty in the other direction because I do not want to hand you a frame that explains everything. And a frame that explains everything is exactly the kind of thing you should distrust. Not all perfectionism is fear. Sometimes the work genuinely is not good enough yet, and your discomfort is accurate and the right move is in fact another pass. Some standards are worth the wait, and some limits are real, not inherited. Sometimes you are stuck for structural reasons that no amount of reclassifying will move, and the work there is not to bulldoze the wall, but it is to stop throwing yourself against it and put your strength where it can actually go. The skill, and it is a skill, is telling the real limit from the imagined one. The genuine craft delay from the fear delay. I'm not asking you to become reckless. Recklessness is just the same misclassification running in reverse, calling a real must a can. Which is why the corrective is not, well, there is no risk. There is risk. The corrective is a better question, and it has to be a question the fear cannot answer for you. Do not ask, well, does this feel dangerous? Because the fear is the thing generating the feeling, and it will say yes every time. That is the trap. Ask it something it cannot fake instead. Name the worst realistic consequence out loud, the actual specific one, and then ask only this. How long does this last? A must leaves damage that does not heal on its own. Money you cannot get back. A relationship genuinely burned. A legal or professional mark that follows you for years. A should hurts and then fades. The criticism you will have forgotten in a month. A status dip that recovers. The awkward afternoon. A can leaves no lasting mark either way. Notice that none of those turn on how bad the thing feels right now. They turn on duration, on whether the worst case is reversible, and duration is exactly the dimension the fear deleted. But a frightened mind can still inflate the estimate. It can still tell you a bruise will last for 10 years. So do not trust the duration estimate on its own either. Anchor it to your own record. Name one real time you did something like this before, something you were genuinely afraid to put out, and count how long the fallout actually lasted. Not how long you dreaded it beforehand. How many days the real consequence was still touching your life afterward. Almost always, the remembered number is a tiny fraction of the predicted one. And that gap, the distance between what you forecast and what actually happened, is the fear made measurable. Now, you're not asking the oracle that lies to you. You are checking its predictions against your own history. And history is the one thing it cannot rewrite. And then comes the part most of this kind of thinking skips, because seeing clearly is not the same as moving. And if you know yourself, you already know the catch. You can reclassify the thing perfectly, agree out loud that it is a can, and still not do it. The gap between seeing and doing is its own separate problem, not a leftover of the first one, and willpower has already lost that fight 100 times. So do not aim the action at the belief and do not try to want it more. Aim at the size. Shrink the action until it drops below the line where the thread system even switches on. And not launch the project. Open the file, write one line in the place where it could one day be seen, and not publish one piece, but paste the first paragraph into the box and leave it sitting in drafts. Make it so small that there is genuinely nothing left to be afraid of, and then do it before you have finished deciding to motion first on a piece too small to flag and let the larger thing assemble from there. The honest version of this is not that you reclassify and the fear lifts and you stride forward. It is that you reclassify, the fear stays, and you do a 2-minute version anyway because you made it smaller than the fear. And if you are someone who has shrunk the action to almost nothing and still watched it sit there untouched, then notice what I just admitted about my own folder, because it is probably true of yours too. I did not keep the work in there because the step was too big. I kept it there because while it stayed potential, I stayed someone who might still succeed. Shipping it risked turning me into someone who tried and fell flat. That is the real reason a 2-minute action that costs nothing still doesn't get done. It is not laziness and it is not willpower shortage. The not doing is protecting something, your sense of who you are. And this is exactly why a deadline or a bet or an accountability partner will not move it. Those all push harder, and a person bracing to protect their own self-image just braces harder against the push. So do not push. Take away what is actually at stake. Before you go to ship the thing, name 1 or 2 things about yourself that are real and that this piece of work cannot prove or disprove. That you are honest, that you have stayed at hard things before, that the people close to you are not going anywhere based on how a post performs. Set those down somewhere solid off the table before you publish. Because once your worth is not riding on how the work lands, the work goes back to just work. It can be liked, it can be ignored, it can be wrong, and you walk away from all 3 completely intact. The fear was never really about the post. It was about what the post might prove about you. Take that off the table first, and the post stops being a verdict on you. It goes back to being one small piece of work, and a piece of work is something you can actually do. If I let the fear of being misunderstood decide what I'm allowed to make, say, publish, and test, then I'm not really the author of my life. An imagined audience, a crowd that exists mostly in my own nervous system, and I am letting them write it. And the irony is that the feedback I'm so afraid of is the only one thing that could actually make the work better. Maybe someone disagrees. Maybe the post gets completely ignored. Maybe a real flaw gets pointed out. That's not a catastrophe. That is data. Reality always returns feedback, sometimes gently and sometimes hard. And if I cannot tolerate feedback, then I cannot honestly claim to be serious about reality at all. The thing I built, the wall to protect the work, is exactly the thing the wall is starving. So go back to the folder, the finished thing nobody has seen. I would bet that if you actually run the question on it honestly, most of what is keeping it there is not a must. It is a can you have been carrying as if it were a must. And the weight of that miscategorization is the whole reason it has not moved. You do not need to become a braver person to ship it. You need to classify it more accurately and then do the smallest real version before the fear refiles it. Here's the question I would actually sit with and not answer too quickly. The thing in your folder, the one you keep telling yourself is simply not ready yet? If you ran the test honestly, named the worst case, and counted the days it would really last, what would it turn out to be? And if the answer is what it usually is, a can you've been carrying as a must, then the next move is not to feel braver about it. It is to open the file tonight and do the smallest version before you finish deciding to.